Attention F1 fans. Lewis Hamilton has found the key to taming the red beast, and just in time for the 2025 Saudi Arabian GP. But how did he go from feeling like a failure to once again challenging the world's best? And what role does Ferrari play in this transformation? Get ready, because what you're about to see could change your perception of Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton arrived in Bahrain carrying not only the weight of expectations for his Ferrari debut, but also the pressure of the worldwide spotlight. He was coming off a turbulent preseason, where the wind tunnel data didn't quite match up with the track, and his adaptation to the SF-25 still seemed like an unsolved puzzle. Qualifying was a real blow to his morale. Hamilton, a 7-time world champion, missed out on the top 8, finishing in 9th place, almost 6/10 behind his teammate Charles Leclerc. But what hurt the most wasn't the time itself. It was what came next. When he got out of the car, he looked broken. Over the radio, he apologized with heartbreaking sincerity. "I'm so sorry, guys. I'm really sorry." That night, alone in his hotel room, something happened that isn't often seen in this sport. Hamilton didn't check telemetry or lock himself away with the engineers. He locked himself away. He forced himself to have an internal conversation. One of those conversations that separates the good from the great. On Sunday, a different driver climbed into the SF-25. It wasn't the frustrated Hamilton from Saturday. It was the resilient Hamilton, the one who has survived all kinds of storms in F1. From the start, the change was noticeable. Little by little, he climbed back into the lead, gaining confidence with each lap. The key was the second stint on medium tires. That's where the genius emerged. Consistent pace, impeccable tire management, and surgical overtaking moves. When he crossed the line in 5th place, many wondered what had changed. The answer lay far from the data and simulations. He was in that silent night of reflection, where he understood that to conquer Ferrari, he must first reconquer his mentality. And it wasn't just a points recovery. It was a message to the paddock. Hamilton didn't come to Ferrari to retire, nor to be a supporting actor. Bahrain was his most human statement and at the same time his most powerful warning. When Lewis Hamilton signed with Ferrari, many thought his experience would be enough to adapt quickly. But what he found in Maranello was a car completely unlike anything he had driven in his 12 years with Mercedes. The word he chose to describe it was no coincidence: alien. A car that not only behaved differently, but seemed to be designed with a philosophy completely opposite to the one he had mastered for more than a decade. The Ferrari SF-25 didn't respond to the usual commands. It wasn't a matter of adjusting the wing or fiddling with the differential. The car demanded a different kind of handling, one that collided head-on with his deepest instincts. In his own words, Lewis confessed that for a long time he had insisted on continuing to drive as he always had, hoping the car would adapt to him, not the other way around. But that strategy didn't work. That moment of mental breakdown was key. Hamilton understood he had to reset. That it wasn't just about adapting his style, but tearing it down and rebuilding it from the ground up. For a driver of his caliber, accustomed to winning with a formula that worked, accepting that he had to relearn was perhaps his biggest challenge so far. One of the most drastic changes was the use of engine braking. Throughout his time at Mercedes, that element wasn't part of his arsenal. At Ferrari, however, it became an essential tool for controlling the car entering corners. This technique directly affects the car's dynamic behavior, and Hamilton had to learn to feel the car from a different perspective. But not only that, the brakes were also different. Ferrari uses Brembo brakes, while Hamilton has been using Carbone industry for years. The difference is significant. The feel, the response, even the balance between the front and rear axles change radically. He found himself with a braking system that, in his own words, moved more than expected. A system that required using the rear brake to turn the car, something completely alien to his natural style. And then there was the so-called window of equilibrium. While Mercedes operated within very narrow margins, the Ferrari allowed for wider configurations, but with added complexity, finding that exact point of maximum efficiency was much more difficult. All of this made Hamilton, for the first time in years, feel like a rookie. But what separates champions isn't just talent. It's the ability to learn. And above all, the humility to recognize that even after 7 world titles, there's always room for improvement. That alien Ferrari, which at first seemed like an enemy, is beginning to become an ally. And in that transition, Hamilton isn't just rediscovering how to drive. He's rediscovering who he is as a driver. There's something that doesn't show up in lap times or telemetry or even statistics. Something that isn't measured by stopwatches, but that decides races, seasons, and legacies. Mindset. In Lewis Hamilton's case, that's his most powerful weapon. More than his overtaking ability, more than his precision in the rain, even more than his racing instinct. After 12 years at Mercedes with 7 titles under his belt, many believed Hamilton was coming to Ferrari to close out his career elegantly, without too many demands. But what happened from the first Grand Prix onwards was exactly the opposite. Lewis not only had to adapt to a completely new car, but also to a different culture, a team that speaks a different language literally and figuratively, and an internal dynamic that already includes an established figure like Charles Leclerc. The easy thing would have been to resist change, to rely on his track record, to demand that the team do everything his way. But that's not what he did. Instead, Hamilton opted for something much more difficult, admitting that he must improve, that he needs to learn, that he needs to adjust. "I have to improve myself too," he said. A simple phrase, but loaded with meaning when coming from one of the most successful drivers of all time. This kind of mentality is rare in elite sport, even more so at 40 when most are already thinking about retirement. What Hamilton is showing is that there is no age for evolution, that the hunger to be better doesn't disappear with titles, that the true champion isn't the one who wins once, but the one who is willing to start over when everything they knew no longer works. And this willingness to reinvent himself is not only inspiring, it's also strategic. Because by accepting that the car won't adapt to him, Hamilton is accelerating his adaptation process. He's sending a message to the team: "I'm here to contribute, not to impose." And that creates a synergy that can make the difference in a season as tight as 2025. This approach also has an impact on his relationship with those around him. The engineers see him differently. His mechanics notice the commitment. Even his teammate, Charles Leclerc, understands that he's racing with someone who hasn't lost his fire. Hamilton isn't just driving a Ferrari. He's building something with him. A new era, a new narrative, a new story of achievement within an already historic career. Ferrari hasn't just signed a 7-time world champion. It's also changed its way of working to adapt to him. And that, at Maranello, isn't something that happens every day. The Scuderia is an institution with unwritten rules, technical traditions, and an identity marked by decades of history. However, with Hamilton's arrival, a silent but profound transition has been triggered. The first major step was technical. After the first few races, where Hamilton was visibly uncomfortable with the SF-25's behavior, Ferrari implemented a package of updates in Bahrain that sought to correct several of those weaknesses. The redesign of the floor, modifications to the edges, and a new diffuser were more than simple aerodynamic developments. They were direct responses to what Hamilton himself had pointed out as problematic. These changes are not trivial. Redesigning a car's underbody in the middle of the season involves weeks of wind tunnel work, complex simulations, and a significant investment of resources. But the message was clear. Ferrari was willing to adjust its design philosophy if it would help Lewis find the necessary balance. The result was evident. In the race, Hamilton found a more stable car, especially at the rear, which had been one of the main complaints in the opening rounds of the calendar. His pace in the second stint on medium tires was not only competitive, but at times matched that of the leaders. Although there was still around 0.4 of a second gap to McLaren, the progress was tangible. But the change at Ferrari goes beyond aerodynamics. It's also a matter of human resources. Fred Vasseur, team principal, has been key in this process. From the outset, he made it clear that the team would do everything possible to adapt the car to Lewis, while still demanding a step forward from him. This two-way relationship is being built on mutual respect and a willingness to collaborate. The technical structure is also responding. Engineers, mechanics, and simulation managers are increasingly aligned with Hamilton's specific needs. They're not just translating the car data for him, they're translating the Ferrari culture for him. And in that fusion of classic and modern, between Italian emotion and British methodology, a new version of the team is being born. The plan doesn't stop in Bahrain. Ferrari is already working on an even larger update package to be introduced at the Spanish Grand Prix. That leap could realistically bring them closer to fighting for victory. But the foundation for that leap is being laid now, race after race, conversation after conversation between driver and factory. This Ferrari isn't the same as it was a year ago, and not just because of what it has on track, also because of what it's willing to change off it. Because when you sign Hamilton, you're not just signing a driver, you're signing a standard. And if you want to compete at that standard, you have to be willing to evolve with it. Within Ferrari, a silent battle is brewing that could define not only the 2025 season, but also the balance of power within Formula One's most iconic team. This battle isn't fought with explosive statements or controversial press conferences, but with every fast lap, every decision made during free practice, and above all, in the way both drivers approach car development. Hamilton arrived at Ferrari with a suitcase full of titles and prestige, but also with a working style forged over more than a decade at Mercedes. Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, represents youth, natural talent, and an almost instinctive understanding of Maranello's DNA. While Leclerc is already integrated into every fiber of the team, Hamilton is still in the process of adapting, both to the car and to the internal structure. What's interesting is how both are approaching the technical and strategic challenge posed by the SF-25. Leclerc takes a methodical approach. He finds a base setup that works for him and maintains it with minimal adjustments throughout the weekend. He's not looking to reinvent the wheel. He's looking for consistency, and that gives him results. In Bahrain, he finished second in qualifying, behind only Piastri. Meanwhile, Hamilton tried to find his own way, moving away from Charles's path, and finished far behind on the grid. This difference in approach prompted reflection from the Briton. After the weekend in Bahrain, Hamilton acknowledged that he was very far from his teammate in terms of setup, and that led him to make an unusual decision for someone of his caliber, to begin migrating toward Leclerc's setup. In other words, to admit that the young Monegasque driver has been able to get more out of the car, and that perhaps following in his footsteps is a more effective strategy than going it alone. It's not often that a 7-time world champion acknowledges, without conflict or excuses, that another driver in the same garage is doing better in certain aspects. But Hamilton did. And that speaks not only to his humility, but also to his competitive intelligence. Adapting, even by copying what works on the car next to you, may be the key to making up ground. What remains to be seen is how that dynamic will evolve. Because if Hamilton starts matching or surpassing Leclerc using similar setups, the atmosphere at Ferrari could become tense. Today, Leclerc is the team's flagship driver, the man who has carried the burden of development in recent years. But with a competitive Hamilton, that hierarchy could falter. For now, everything remains within the bounds of respect and collaboration. But Formula One isn't a sport of friendship. It's a war for thousandths of a second. And while both push the SF-25 to the front, they also push against each other. Not with words, with times, with on-track decisions, with race strategies that could, at some point, split the Ferrari wall. Hamilton versus Leclerc isn't an open confrontation, but it's real. And if Ferrari wants to fight for the championship, it will have to manage not only technical development, but also the delicate balance between two drivers who are willing to do anything to be number one. What Lewis Hamilton is experiencing with Ferrari this 2025 season isn't just a team transition. It's a total transformation. A process of reinvention that few drivers in the history of the sport have dared to undertake, much less with 40 years and 7 world championships under their belts. The easy thing would have been to stay comfortable, extend his career at Mercedes, or accept a more secondary role. But Hamilton chose the most difficult thing, to start from scratch in an unfamiliar environment, with a car that challenges him at every turn, with every braking point, with every technical decision. And he's doing it not with arrogance, but with a rare blend of humility, deep analysis, and undimmed ambition. From the mistakes in Bahrain, the lonely nights of reflection, the words of self-criticism that broke the facade of the unflappable champion, to the slow but steady adaptation to the Ferrari SF-25, what we are seeing is a driver evolving before our eyes. It's not just about changing his driving style. It's about changing his mindset, his approach, his way of leading. Ferrari, for its part, has shown it is willing to meet him halfway. The car updates, the team's willingness to adjust processes to make Hamilton feel more comfortable, and the public endorsement of Fred Vasseur indicate a real commitment to making this partnership work. The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix will be the next big test. A circuit of pure speed where any mistake is costly, but also where talent can make a huge difference. Hamilton has won there before. He knows the layout. And now he arrives with renewed confidence. Not because he's already mastered everything, but because he's begun to understand the most important thing. That to get the best out of the Ferrari, he must first get the best out of himself. If he can translate his growing understanding of the car into solid results, especially in qualifying, he could become a serious contender. Perhaps not for this specific championship, but certainly to build, together with Ferrari, a story that still has chapters to write. The true potential of this duo is only just beginning to reveal itself. And if the pace continues to improve, if the driver-machine symbiosis continues to refine, then we could be witnessing not the end of one era, but the beginning of another.